Uh, at the end of this beautiful conversation that we have had with you today, there is a question. Probably Hanuman Ji is the only deity among all these deities in Sanatan Dharma who has maximum number of temples dedicated to him across India. Every single village, every town, every city at least has minimum one temple dedicated to Hanuman Ji. But does that also mean that the thousands and lakhs of people who visit regularly, frequently to those temples also follow the same virtues, the same characters, the same set of values that Hanuman Ji stood for, or his life story propagates?
There were two works in this nation that had to happen, and in any society only these are the two kinds of work that happen. One work that happens on a physical ground, where we have to create something through which, or that particular thing becomes a channel for us for the higher growth. Actually, if you go back to the history of whole temple making of Hanuman Chalisa, and still if you can go in the Orissa part or Bengal part, you will see this movement is still happening. The temples of Hanuman Ji are still being built. If you go in Orissa in last 5 years, you will find that wherever the temples didn't take place or didn't have the place, some people came forward and started to making the temples in the entry or the exit of the village. That is one work that has happened in last, I think, it's not more than 300 years.
Even across Maharashtra, rural Maharashtra or central India, Samartha Ramdas Swami was the one who used Hanuman temples, building Hanuman temples to channelize the energies of the youth, rural youth.
That's where I was coming. That if you see that the movement began of creating the temples of Hanuman Ji, it's after 1846, 1847. That's when the movement came into that huge structure. There were earlier what used to happen, if you go back to the Indian history, there would be temples of Hanuman Ji. Every village used to have a temple of Shivaji. Shivaji was everywhere, very near to the talabs or the tanks of the village tanks, Shivaji will exist. But Hanuman Ji history goes back in last couple of 100 years, 200 years. What happened when we realized, when this country's deep spiritual people understood that what was happening, the kind of,
invasion.
Not only invasion was, the invasion was happening in our lives too, in our heritage too, in our religion too, in our philosophy too. The character of our nation was being changed. That was happening. So people realized that if the character of this nation would get changed, then this nation would not exist. This nation is not a boundary of certain locality between the two kinds of samudras or the seas. The nation is much more than that. And people wanted to make sure that not to change or not to allow that character change of this nation, they had to find somebody. And they realized that it's a Hanuman Ji. This is only Hanuman Ji who can allow the youth to understand the devotion, the bhakti, the love, affection, prema, the duty, the conduct, the politics, everything, because Hanuman Ji is embodiment of all that. People needed to understand that. That's when the whole movement of Maruti temples in Maharashtra, Hanuman Ji temples, Bajrangi temples, and Bhakt Hanuman temple in South India, this all came at the same time. At the same time, to make what the Britishers, French, Dutch, even the Islamic invasion, people, those who wanted to come and occupy this country and were trying to change the character of this nation. While changing the character of this nation, they were aware that unless you kill the youth of this country, you destroy them, you cannot change the character of this nation. So people, the seekers, the wise, the rishis, the munis, the great politicians of this country realized that what was happening, and thus started a movement of creating the temples of Hanuman Ji. Because Hanuman Ji inspires all the qualities that are needed in this society for having the equilibrium of the society. If you go back and see Hanuman Ji, he had the greatest political wisdom. Absolute great political wisdom. He was an ambassador. He had all the qualities that a nation needed at that time. So people started to having a movement where the temples of Hanuman Ji were built all over the country. That was the primary movement. The second thing what was happening is that the vigor of the youth is very important if you are challenging the nations or the societies that are barbaric in their own nature. I am sorry that anybody who came to this country and sought the material wealth, none wanted to have the spiritual wealth of this country. People wanted material wealth. We were so rich. We had money. And as much as that, according to some beliefs, I was just reading few days back William Dalrymple's the count of money. I think hundreds of trillions of pound was taken at that time for the country in 100 200 years. We were looted for thousands of years. So they wanted to kill our youth. If youth is having power, if youth is having the body, the arena, the quality, they would fight back. So movement was started with first with the temple building. There was no question of having to give the philosophy of human life through Hanuman Ji. People wanted to build the vigorous youth. So second movement came around Hanuman Ji's temple, the Vyayam Shala. It started to appear all over the country. It was in Bengal to it was in Kanyakumari. Everywhere the Vyayam Shala started to appear, where young kids would go and learn the nature of this body, how they can seek the power from Hanuman Ji and become the Sainiks. And I am not going to call anything else Sainiks. It's a very important word. That was done. The third part was and is, right now the time is gone. The nation is free. There is a kind of freedom that we all have achieved. I wouldn't agree that it's a complete freedom that we have got. We may have the political freedom, but still culturally we are so dependent. So now the work starts from these temples where the philosophy, the spirituality of Hanuman Ji has to go all over the country. So this nation doesn't require only these numbers of temples. I think we need billions of them. And there is a more and more. I think that we have to understand that building the Hanuman temples is about building the nation. Because empowerment of youth is done. In some way, people are quite clear about their health. Youth is little bit clear about their health. But right now this youth need to understand the philosophy of Hanuman Ji. Because if we cannot give that, if we cannot create that donation of the spiritual heritage of Hanuman Ji to our youth, then we cannot seek and we have no future. Because then people would not understand what politics is. If we have to understand, we should realize Hanuman Ji in our being. People would not understand what does it mean to be defeated and then win back again, where there is a no loss ever. The constant hope is Hanuman Ji. The constant wish is Hanuman Ji. Hanuman Ji is somebody who never thought that something is impossible. Hanuman Ji was somebody who knew that even if there will be avengers, even if the people, those who are against him, he would make them his own. He never believed in others. So these are the qualities that we have to enrich in this nation. And for that to happen, there is a need of millions of more temples of Hanuman Ji. And I am for them.
Well, so what Vivek Ji is essentially saying is that Hanuman Ji, or the legend of Hanuman Ji, is not just about devotion, dedication, or unlocking divine potential within oneself. It is also about resurrection, renaissance, and revival. So with the point, with a promise that we would request Vivek Ji to speak more on his views about Hanuman Chalisa, let's say Pranam.